Good afternoon and welcome to the University of York. My name is Joan Concannon. I'm Director of External Relations. It is my enormous pleasure and privilege to welcome two incredibly inspirational women, Mina Al-Haraibi and Fatima Gailani. Before we move on, I just want to run through a couple of housekeeping remarks that hopefully will make everything easy for everybody. First of all, you can post any questions you wish to ask Fatima on the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. If you wish to disable subtitles, you can do that by clicking on the live transcript screen button on the bottom of your screen and just hitting hide subtitles. So today is one of the final events we're doing in March of this year to celebrate the incredible achievements of women around the world as part of the International Women's Day initiative. And it is just such an enormous pleasure and privilege to be able to welcome Fatima Gailani, who is one of the peace negotiators dealing with the very complex issues of achieving peace in Afghanistan. Mina Al-Haraibi is a long-standing friend of the University of York and the York Festival of Ideas, and I'm truly delighted that in our new Zoom world of events that we've managed to have Mina zooming in from her office in the Middle East, where she is editor-in-chief of the national newspaper. Previously, Mina was the deputy editor of the London-based newspaper Shaq Al-Razat. So today is really such an honor for the University of York because we are passionate believers in the transformative power of education to change lives around the world. We are a university that believes very much in social purpose and social justice. We have a long track record through our Centre for Women's Studies and our law school in championing social justice. And we have a particularly strong interest in ensuring that we can raise awareness about the complexities of women's challenges in many, many places around the world, and the role and to celebrate the influential role of women in very complex issues like peace negotiation. So thank you again to Fatima for her time today, where she is essentially coming into us from her peace negotiations and has very kindly taken a break from those very complex negotiations. And to Mina, who has joined us from her newspaper office. And I will hand over now to Mina to introduce Fatima. And thank you again so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Joan, and thank you for the lovely introduction. And I look forward to the day I can come and see you in New York again in person. But for now, it's lovely to be with you over Zoom. And thank you to all of you who have tuned in. I am delighted to be moderating this conversation with an incredible woman and an incredible peacemaker. Fatima Gailani plays an important role in Afghanistan and is a role model for women, not only in Afghanistan, but beyond, because of all the investment she has made in humanitarian work, in championing women's rights, from her role in the drafting and writing of the Afghan constitution to her current role as a member of the negotiating team, the Afghan negotiating team. She was also head of the Afghan Red Crescent Society for quite some time. Fatima, welcome to this conversation and thank you for making the time to speak with us. I have many questions for you, but I also, of course, will welcome the questions of the audience, so please do start posting your questions. But first, Fatima, thank you again. And I wanted to ask you about something that's actually very current in today's news. There is the negotiating team that has gone to Moscow, the Afghan delegation that's gone to Moscow. 21 people were invited, only one of them was a lady. And there have been many questions asking, where are the women? And even though, of course, the Afghan side would say, well, there is some representation, we have one woman. I wanted to ask you, first of all, what your views were on that, and why do you think the representation is still not to the level that actually represents Afghan society, where more than half of society, I think up to 54%, are actually women?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I'm equally delighted. You are not a person who was not known to us in Afghanistan and again beyond. It's a pleasure to see you, and I hope that one day we will see each other face to face. We, from our negotiation delegation, we send one woman, and the rest are the politicians. The politicians should have brought women with them. Also on the other side of the negotiation table from the Taliban side, I hope that one day we will see women there also. But unfortunately, this is a fact that when it comes to political decisions, whether it is in Afghanistan or in other countries, the role of women is not as colorful as we want to. But I want to assure you that Habiba Sarabi is a woman who could represent us, women of Afghanistan, very well. She was the first woman who became governor in Afghanistan, and not just a governor, a very successful governor. She's a medical doctor. She was our one of the first ministers that we have for women's affairs, and she has a lots of weight in the country, in the people, and so here we are from our side. We do have a woman from four. We have sent one, but I wish that the politicians also had brought women, and also the government should have brought more women.
Now, I know for many people it would seem obvious why we're so keen to have women at the table, but I'd like to ask your personal perspective, why it is so important to have that female voice at the negotiating table, especially for these Afghan negotiations, but also in wider peace building.
First of all, if you look into the history of peacemaking, those peace negotiations which had women involved in it were usually very successful. In Afghanistan, in the old Afghanistan, before war Afghanistan, I remember very well as a child that women played a very important role in peacemaking between tribes, between families, and it was taken for granted that women would be the peacemakers in their region, and some of them will even gain a name for peacemaking, so they will be borrowed from their own tribe and taken to other places. Unfortunately, war destroyed even those kind of traditional systems that we had for women, going in exile, and so many other problems were put on the top of each other, that women's issue had become less and less significant in Afghanistan. So much so that when we were fighting the Soviet Union, we had lots of women in social affairs, in humanitarian works. But I think in the political side, it was only me. And it was sad, and it was a huge burden too. That's why it is important to have women. Here, yes, we have only four women. But what we did is to get connected to women in Afghanistan. And thanks to technology, every day we are in touch with young women, seasoned women, women with experience, and also women who want to be leaders in the future, to hear to what they are saying and to listen to their expectation and discuss those expectations and act upon it. And the other important thing is that when for women in the negotiation team, we are not only talking about women's issue. We have two hats. Yes, women's issue is extremely important for us because that's what we are, but also we are divided in different committees, and we are involved in every aspect, from ceasefire to the future political setup of Afghanistan to humanitarian work, or whatever, we are involved in it. Now, I am in the legal team, and hopefully that we will have a joint Afghanistan with the Taliban, and inshallah that we will have to work on our future together.
Inshallah. Thank you very much for raising that point, that of course you're there as women and women's affairs are important, but there's the wider issues for the whole country. And so I wanted to ask you about that. As these negotiations continue, there are concerns from some people inside Afghanistan, but also those of us abroad who care about Afghanistan and want to see how its trajectory goes, that there could be certain things imposed that would limit freedoms for Afghans, regardless men or women. How, especially as you are part of the legal committee, can you make those guarantees, especially when at least some in the Taliban side would not even believe in these freedoms or in these rights as being essential rights?
Well, it is very important to explain things. It is very important to negotiate things. And from the day one that we were just taken as a sort of peace show or showpiece or whatever. Today, it is not like that. They deal with us, they talk with us equally, the same way that they talk with our male colleagues. We discuss things which has sometimes nothing to do with women's issue. It is the general future of Afghanistan that we are talking. They got used to the new Afghanistan. The Afghanistan, which is not just women's presence, it is the presence of the minority. It is presence of the youth. It is the presence of other sects in Islam, the Sunnis, the Shias, the Ismailis, that this is the new Afghanistan that we are representing. When I go back to women's issue, this is true that changes for women started exactly 100 years ago. It was 1921 that first women went for further education outside Afghanistan. I remember as a child when first women became minister or went to the parliament, I knew that it is exciting, but I didn't know why it was exciting. But I knew, I was aware of it. But the Holocaust of the situation for women made us understand that this time we are not going to take it for granted. This time we have to work for something which could be sustainable. If we undermine women, if we undermine minorities, if we undermine youth in Afghanistan, this peace talk will not succeed. Even if we come to a conclusion, it will not sustain. Look, in Bonn, we made one mistake, not having Taliban included. We are still talking peace. So this time, no one should be forgotten. Never in the history of Afghanistan, we had so many educated, talented, and determined women, young or old, that they will not allow such a thing will happen. Our constitution is not a secular constitution. It is an Islamic constitution. It is made with a consultation with endless ulama inside Afghanistan and outside Afghanistan. So if they have an issue, let's talk about it. But we need support from the whole world, but especially from the Muslim world, that look, what you expect for yourself, this has to be expected for Afghanistan also.
Your point about the constitution being, rooted in being an Islamic country. This is something that sometimes for Muslims is also conversational and difficult sometimes because one person's interpretation of Islam unfortunately differs, even though the Quran and the Sunnah are the same. And in theory, we shouldn't have these disparities. But politics creates these disparities. And quite often it's translated onto women and the vulnerable, be they children, be it minorities. So how, again, coming from your deep knowledge and background, can we say it is one Islam, actually? You can't tell me that your interpretation and my interpretation can be treated differently.
Well, this is exactly what I thought. I did my formal education like any other young woman in the age of that everyone else did. But at the age of 40, when Afghanistan went into the civil war, I realized that so many things, what is haram for women, this is haram, that is haram, this is allowed, that's not allowed. So I decided to educate myself because I had learned Sufism and all that when I went to university as a young woman. But then when at the age of 40, I realized that no, I have to know as much as an imam knows in order to know myself, my boundaries. But when I studied, I learned my liberty. I learned that, oh my God, I mean, inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. No one is better than the other, but in piety and knowledge. So this was a thing that gave me a courage, that it gives me a confidence to go and talk about it. And this was the day that I went, Allah yarhamu, to Dr. Zaki Badawi. And I said, could I join your college? She said, but my dear, this is for the imams. I said, I don't want to go and become an imam, but I want to know as much as an imam. And because the education is in English and it was catered for imams in Britain, so it was easy for me to join. And I did. And even my book that I wrote about a fantastic person, Muhammad Musa Shafiq, that just day before yesterday, an institute in Afghanistan was named after him. I wrote about him. And that was also Dr. Zaki Badawi told me that, write about those Islamists that had modernity with it. Mm-hmm. So here in the Constitution, when we were started, don't think that we didn't have challenge. We had people who would think exactly the way that the challenges that we are facing today. But we saw the help of people like Dr. Hashim Kamali, who is an authority in the world, and he's an Afghan. He's the son of one of our best jurists in Afghanistan. So we got his help and explained and talked and talked and talked. And I'm sure that in the future also, we will come to a good conclusion if we listen to each other and we listen those people who have authority above our authority.
Inshallah. I want to ask you, are you optimistic that the current talks can bring the peace that Afghanistan deserves?
When I started working for Afghanistan and started going from television to television, university to university, sometimes high school to high school, I was 26-year-old. I was 24 when the war started in Afghanistan. Today, last January, I turned 67. I'm still doing it. If I didn't have hope, am I crazy to do this? Yes, I have hope. Who is the person who deserves doing and sitting in this important negotiation table if doesn't have hope? Yes, I do have hope. I do have hope, but not take for granted everything. We need the support of people of Afghanistan. We need determination from the countries who are supporting us. And also, I would like very much to put this forward that in the future of Afghanistan, every country who is helping us, they should have those values totally connected to their help. That from now on, no one should take the help from outside for granted, whether it is human right, women right, or just get rid of corruption. These should be taken very seriously because these are the chains that they come together.
We have a question that wants to follow up on the hope line. Aaron Rath asks, what or who renews your hope in working for peace over the past decade?
Could you say it again?
What or who renews your hope as you keep working for peace?
After God, my reliance is on people. And I think that it is the encouragement of the people who sustain me all these years. When I was abroad for 24 years, I was outside my country and fiercely, working towards going back to Afghanistan. When I entered Afghanistan, I didn't recognize my own country. I didn't recognize the area I was living in. So that was a shock. So then I realized and I learned how to get in touch with those people who never lived. Because we were people who was living in Iran and Pakistan, millions of refugees. Then there were people who were living in the West. Then there were people who stayed in spite of the war, in spite of the rockets, landing on their heads and all that, they stayed. So we could have been sense of disunity with each other, that who is the real victim? Little me that left my country or little you? So the first thing I did that how to talk with all of them together. And that's how I felt that my place is not so much in politics, but it is in the politics of neutrality and go to the Red Crescent. But the encouragement and the hope and the determination definitely comes from the new generation of Afghanistan, definitely.
What advice would you give for young Afghans that want to work towards peace, especially as the level of violence continues to be high and some days can be quite difficult?
Um, you will not believe me if I tell you that I take their advice most of the time, but I'm humbled that when they ask me advice, and because of working for so long years with the volunteers who are usually very young people, I learned how to communicate with them and how to take advice from them and then talk with each other. Education, educate yourself. Don't worry if bad things are happening in the country. But if you are educated, no one can take this. No one could steal it. No one could take it away from you. That's now it's a good opportunity to thank the York University to train so many Afghans, educated so many young Afghans that they came to a ministerial post. Today we have Hanif Atmar, who graduated from there as our foreign minister, and many other ministers. And I want to take this opportunity to thank my dear friend Sultan Barakat, who's played a fantastic role in educating Afghans and York University. And then I have a nephew who is Yorkie. But my message to those young ministers, my message to those young people who will be the future ministers, that look at Atmar, look at people who were just in the war, in the middle of the war, but it was the education who took them up, and it was the education who gave them these very important prestige that they have today. So apart from the education, it is patience. It is very difficult to have patience when every day someone is targeted and killed. How could you tell a woman that go become a judge when a judge is targeted to be killed? How could you tell a young woman to go and become a responsible journalist when a journalist is followed to be killed? I know it is difficult, but I still beg you to continue and just don't let them break your heart or break your backbone. Don't.
Beautiful words of advice. I want to ask you if you could go back and give yourself advice, that 26, 27-year-old woman that you described to us. If you could go back to her now and give her advice, what advice would you give her?
Well, I criticized myself several times on our national media, and now the time has come that I will criticize myself. When I was very young, I was in my 20s, mid-20s, that I started being a spokesperson for the Afghan resistance. At that time, the human rights issues and the women rights issues was becoming a little bit challenging. But I was so scared that if I talk about it, if I voice it, that big goal, which is remove out of Afghanistan and push them out of Afghanistan, maybe it will harm the big cause of jihad or the big cause of resistance against one of the superpowers. Maybe now one of the things that I would have changed, that I would have talked about that more. I did, but I should have done it a little bit more. This is the one thing I would have changed. But now I hear people criticizing that why we fought an invader. What? Never, not even once. I would change that. If my country is that way invaded, I would do exactly the same thing. So this is not I'm going to change at all. But the way I went forward, maybe I would have changed a few things. This is the truth.
Thank you. I appreciate how frank and open you are with us, living up to your reputation as always being so frank and direct, but also wise. We have several questions. One of them, Evie Napman asks, do you think that the needs for Afghan women and the issues they face today in 2021 have changed a lot since the 2001 invasion of Afghanistan by the United States or the coalition?
Not really, because in spite of that huge change which has come for women, I mean, if you go inside Afghanistan, if you see, look at our ambassador in New York. This is a girl who grew up in war in Afghanistan. Today, her name is Adela Raz, And she is no less than any ambassador from anywhere in the world, whether it is the education, whether it is her capacity. Look at our ambassador in Washington, a highly educated woman, again, grew up in war. So, but we also see that a delegation goes to Moscow and we want more women. Yes, we do want more women, but at least we have one woman. And most importantly, we are able to get up and voice it and criticize it. So this is a huge difference. And then if you wanted to choose whom to take, you have a huge array of choice that which one of these incredible women we should take with us. So this is a big change. But whether our main folk have changed a lot, I hope they will slowly change. I think they are changing.
There's a question from an anonymous attendee, so I can't read their name, but they ask you, do you think that there is a country out there that has the right approach for women's rights? Is there a particular country you would say, oh, this country has it right?
Quite frankly, I didn't think about it. We all talk about Sweden, that it has 50-50 and all that. But I really, in Afghanistan, and sometimes I'm criticized for saying that, we should not sacrifice quality for quantity. Because what happens if a woman minister makes a mistake? They never say that this minister made a mistake, that women made a mistake. So I really want to have it right, even if it goes a little bit slower, but I want it right. I want to go forward right and not rush it, but have it meaningfully. Look, in 1964, we had women in the parliament. They entered the parliament in an open competition with men, with no support of Westerners. It was just something which happened in the country, men and women together during His Majesty King Zahir Shah. We got the right to vote together, men and women. And we had women in the parliament, we had women in the Senate, and women became ministers. But they were capable women. So now we have more women to choose from. But I never thought about it that I want to copy another country. More, I think that how we become better and better in our own country.
Do you believe in quotas?
Absolutely. For the time being, absolutely. As I said, in 1964, we didn't need it because it was coming naturally. But now, such a setback women had for such a long time that I do believe in the system of quota. And I think this is a door opener for women, even if they have it for in the new constitution, even if they put it for, say, 20 years or 15 years, but they have to put it. And it is important that we should have it. And it is very important that we all should obey it, whether it is in the government, whether it is in the parliament, or whatever. I think it is important. Yes, I do believe in it.
That's great. I do too. I used to be more skeptical about it, but as I get older and see the realities, I think having a quota opens certain doors that would never be opened.
Exactly.
So we have a question from Kat Sanderok. And Kat says, the Colombian peace negotiations between 2012 and 2016 had delegations of victims, including women on both sides, which was very effective. Do you think this strategy could work in Afghanistan?
I don't think for now that, as we say it in Afghanistan, that we should not put salt on wounds, but they should be taken very seriously. And I believe that we should have a parallel meeting and we should address those issues. I was working in the Afghan Red Crescent Society, and I was able to see the victims of both sides. Remember that victims of our sides, they happened in cities with social media, with cameras, with media. In matter of minutes, it was public knowledge and everyone was aware of it. But when the victims happened on the other side, on the Taliban side, most people didn't even know that was happening. For capturing or killing one Talib, a village could have been destroyed, and lots of lives, was taken from really badly. So I saw that what is happening on both sides. That's why I was trying to explain to the other side of the table that we have victims the same way. That has to be the same peacemaking, and we have to own this peacemaking, regardless of the values difference we have in our values. Let's leave that to negotiate it, to talk about it, to come to a conclusion. But the most important thing is that we should take the ownership of this peace talk, both sides, because there are two important things that we share, which is our country and our religion, and the responsibility that we have to our people. This is the third important thing. So this responsibility has to be shared by both to go towards peace together and keep this peace talk from the harm of politics, language, sectarian, and all that. Then we will succeed, I think.
So thank you for that. We have a question also from someone who's anonymous. They didn't put their name. They say, is there today strong anti-American sentiment in Afghanistan, especially among female Afghans?
We are human beings like everywhere else. One day you like a country, the next day you don't like a country, then again you like the country. But in general, we want to live in harmony with our neighbors, with the region, and with the big powers. And let's not forget that Afghanistan needs help for a long, long time until we stand on our own feet. So we cannot afford, and the young generation of Afghanistan, women of Afghanistan, men of Afghanistan, we know that we need this help from the US or from the EU or all of them together. And so that's why we don't have a permanent hate or love thing. I mean, it changes. Today we are angry. Today we most women were very angry with President Trump, and then President Trump became the US. But today maybe they are not angry with them. So we are like any other country that we like or dislike people, and then the next day we like them again.
I like your answer because it's true. I think these things go up and down. One of our participants here, again anonymous, they haven't put their name. They said we hear here in the UK, so they're based in the UK, that COVID-19 pandemic has been damaging for women's rights and equality, sending some women back in time. Would you say that COVID-19 has that effect in Afghanistan today?
In Afghanistan, COVID-19 goes beyond that. Where is the vaccination? I mean, slowly it is coming, but our part of the world is usually have to wait in the queue until things will come. I don't think that it will affect women especially, but it affected many people in Afghanistan. But sometimes women are reluctant to get out and seek help, probably like any other disease. But I didn't see anything that specifically that I could tell you now that yes, it did or it did not. Honestly, I don't know.
Sometimes people worry, at least in some Arab countries, and actually in some European countries, we've seen an escalation in domestic violence because of COVID-19, because women were less frequently going out of the house, especially in countries where you had lockdowns. So they had less ability to go out. But I think in Afghanistan, you haven't had a specific lockdown to do with COVID.
No, we didn't. And even if we did, no one would obey it. So, I mean, those women who were locked anyway, they were locked anyway. And there are lots of women that, with or without COVID, they are locked. Unfortunately, this is a sad reality of our part of the world. But I don't think COVID had changed it more dramatically. I don't think so.
And can I ask you, a personal question, which is the influence your parents had on you. Tell us a bit more, especially about your father, but also your mother, the influence they had on you and how you think they've made you the woman you are today.
This is a very important question because this is what made me today. My father was a very important religious leader in Afghanistan. He passed away only 3 years ago. He was the head of the Qadiri order. The name Gailani comes from that. But he was very, very careful that women's issue will not die in Afghanistan. And I'm telling you that the story that this brought me, the story which brought me as I am today, I was supposed to start my PhD in Cambridge. And my father happened to visit the UK at that time. And he told me that, could I ask you to do something else? I was thinking that what else could be more important than my PhD? Say that, look, jihad has started. We are fighting one of the superpowers. And I see that the question of women is getting slowly less and less, and especially in the politics of Afghanistan. We have to keep this door open for two reasons. One, either a foreign version of liberty of women will come. It will not sustain because it will not be the Afghan way and the Islamic way. And the other thing is that I can't do this with other people's daughters. I have to do it with my own daughter. You have to enter the politics of the jihad. And we will give you a role, but we train you to do that because this door should not stop. This was my father. At that time, I thought, I am giving a sacrifice. But today, I think this is the best decision. And what I am today was based on the decision. My mother was a very strong woman, Allah yarhamha. She's also not alive. She was a very, very strong woman. And she believed that a woman should be educated, although she had only school education. But she believed in reading and encouraging me to read and read a lot. And she taught me how to use my own capacity rather than use the family name or the other comforts that I had. This is exactly the sentence that or the words that she told me one day. She said that you can't share your name with others. You can't share your comfort, materialistic comfort with others. One thing that you could share with others is to understand them and work for them. And this is the payback time, that the luxury that you have, it came from the respect of the people and you have to pay it back. So she encouraged me with that, all this. But my father opened the door that was not open for most women. And that's why in our parts of the world, not just in Afghanistan, a man who believes in women's presence in every aspect of one's country is the only way that a woman could go forward. No matter how much talent you have, no matter how much education you have, if your way is blocked by a man, whether it is a husband or a father or a brother, you cannot go forward. So I am very, very lucky to have those parents. And my grandmothers, they were very strong. They had an influence on me.
Allah yarhamhum jami'an, may they rest in peace.
Ameen.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I always find that your relationship with your family can, of course, everybody determine who they are, but it's lovely to get this insight. We have several questions, but also a comment. So Ramato Omar Baku says, this is not a question, but a comment. I would like to commend you and all women for amplifying the voices of women and being courageous enough to take action.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Another question for you from an anonymous participant is, where do you see women's rights in Afghanistan in 5 years' time?
It is very difficult that I would anticipate. It's very difficult to say it, that what exactly it will be. And my really hope is that we will not change many things regarding women in this constitution. Constitution is a political thing. Politics could change it, whether we have parliamentary system or a presidential system and all that. But when it comes to human right, women's right, and minorities' right, it is extremely important that what we could accommodate in this constitution should not change. Because it was very carefully done, and it was done Islamically. So to go lower than that when these women lived the last 20 years with this constitution, that will be not fair. Just a few days ago, just by accident, I found my speech in Georgetown University that I'm talking about this constitution before it goes to the Grand Assembly, to Loya Jirga. And I'm praying to God in my speech that things will not change much for women, which it didn't. Actually, even if it changed, because we were trying for one seat reserved in the parliament, and we got 2 seats in the parliament. And this was granted, and this was with the help of men in that constitution. I mean, in the Loya Jirga of the constitution, Loya Jirga. So when I listen to that, it is a younger version of me is saying exactly what I'm saying today, that let's safeguard this. 17, 18 years ago, I was saying it, and I'm saying it again. Let's safeguard it. I hope that it will stay, but I don't know.
We have another question for you from the audience. They ask, is it possible to get equality for women in all regions of Afghanistan, or is it easier in cities like Kabul?
Many countries, like I can say with the exception of North European countries, most countries, the situation of women in the big cities, in the capital and big cities, is much different than what it is in the rural countries and in other places. So Afghanistan is not an exception. But my hope is that education should go everywhere. Now we have a digital opportunity that we can send education to every home, that we could send education in those places that they don't have school. Let's work on that. This is important. If you educate women, men and women, if you educate young generation, there is no limit for it. Then we can bring a change. Before, we had this excuse, or maybe not an excuse, an obstacle, that how could we build schools everywhere in every village? We don't have the money, we don't have the teacher and all that. But now look at it. Look at me and you. We are in the different parts of the world, and we are talking to the world. So I think we have to take this seriously, that education should go in homes of people, in the mosques of people, in remote areas. So then we can hope for a proper equality, really, we will.
It's incredible the power of technology and what it can do, even though nothing can replace in-person connections, but in terms of education and also opening up horizons, it's hugely important. So let's hope that for children in many parts of the world, this hopefully means an access to more education.
Inshallah.
We have a question from Patricia Davis. So Patricia is asking you, does the tradition of arranged marriage still exist? And if so, what impact does it have on women's freedoms and choice, especially in terms of participation in public life?
Well, yes, it exists in Afghanistan, it exists in India, it exists in Pakistan, it exists in many countries like ours. It's a tradition that slowly the choice of the girl is becoming more and more. But if you compare this tradition with Islam, it's not parallel at all. In Islam, a woman has a choice to say yes or no to the choice of the parents. yes, the choice of the parents because they see the good of their daughter. Is it important to take it in some extent, but to force it? Absolutely not. I believe that with the force of Islam, we can fight wrong traditions. But I mean, arranged marriage is not necessarily is a bad thing. I mean, what is the difference between an arranged marriage and all these sites that they find you a husband or a boyfriend or something? I don't see a big difference. Well, they arrange it, but they will charge you, but your parents will not charge you at least. Sometimes
I love that comparison. I've never heard that before, but it makes so much sense. At least your parents know you, as you said. But the point, I think the serious point is this idea of choice, of having
yes.
the ability to say this works for me or this does not work for me, which is
this different. Definitely that no one knows that what marriage works and what marriage doesn't work. This is a myth that if I choose someone, it will definitely work, or if my parents will choose it or not. No, but at least if your religion allows you to choose your husband or you choose your wife, this should be allowed. If this is a mistake, let it be the mistake of these two people, not a family mistake. This is what I believe.
So can I ask you, I mean, I find it interesting that, you know, you're on the peace negotiating team. We are talking about, of course, women's affairs, but here we are talking about marriage. We're talking about families. Do you think a man would be asked these questions? A man who is speaking from Afghanistan?
Say it again. A man would ask me these questions?
Do you think if you were a man, you would be asked these questions? Or do you think naturally, because you are a woman, you have to explain these things more than your male colleague?
No, actually, sometimes men are asked that what they believe. That I ask our two ulamas that they are colleagues, and I ask them, and they said exactly what I'm saying. That's yes, we should take tradition in some extent, but if you go only from Islamic point of view, no, you have your own choice. I think the question of women has become quite a thing that everyone is asked, but maybe they ask this question more from women than men. Maybe that's true.
So I want to ask you, you know, where unfortunately we don't have too much time left. So I want to ask you about how can, inshallah, if the peace talks come to an agreement, a positive conclusion, how do you win the peace? How do you maintain the peace? Because maybe in some ways that's when the hard work starts, and we've seen this in other peace processes. So tell us your approach about that, what you think about that, and how important it will be to include everybody in such a peace.
This is how we talk about it. That if a peace is not inclusive, if a peace is not fair, if this peace doesn't look into every aspect of a new Afghanistan, it will not work. I don't think, first of all, that we will not have the peace, and then even if we force it, we cannot sustain it. That's why it is important that we have an inclusion of everybody in Afghanistan, from men, women, gender side, from the ethnic side, from religious side, from every single side. We have to have it right this time. We cannot afford to have it wrong this time. And we have to accept each other. We have to accept that Afghanistan is a country with different languages, with different ethnicities. We do look different from each other, but we have one country, and this country deserves peace. It is a very, very long time. 42 years is a long time. So let's have it right. So we simply have to be very careful, that's all. And we should not rush things. We should not.
Can I ask you, for the people who are listening to us live now as we record, but also people who will watch this in the future, who are not politicians and not diplomats, but want to help Afghanistan, want to support Afghanistan, what can they do? What would you suggest they should do?
It's a very difficult thing because we need a list of things that they could choose from. If inshallah that we have, or when we have a peaceful Afghanistan, We need volunteers. I remember as a teenager or even as a young Afghan, that people used to come and volunteer in Afghanistan in education, in many things, in health and all that. I honestly believe that anyone who wants to participate, whether it is a country or it's an individual, I would say education, education, education. And this is the key for the future of Afghanistan. And even if one person wants to help one person of education in Afghanistan, it will help, it will change things. If you educate one woman in a family, things will dramatically change. So I would go back to what I really believe. Now that I'm talking to you, for me, even as a teenager, it was a shock that a religion which starts with iqra, read, with ilm qalam, the art of writing, and we have illiterate people in it. Why? Why is that? Because when the order of praying and shahada came, I do it. With fastings come, I'm doing it. Why did we take that first message so lightly? And if it was not important, why was it the first message? As a Muslim, I am ashamed and I'm shocked that we have one illiterate person in our countries. And I really, really mean it.
Very strong words, especially as you said, the first word of the Quran is Iqra, and this was the first word for us as Muslims that we were told, even as children, this was the first revelation to the Prophet. So I want to ask you, and this is going to be my last question for you, sadly, because our time is running out. But my last question for you is we go back to the origins of this conversation, which is, peacemaking and the role of women in peacemaking. So as you leave us with your final thoughts, what do you think is the ingredient for negotiators together to actually be able to make that peace happen and make it a lasting peace, as you said? What's that secret ingredient?
First of all, we should put aside our differences, whether it's a gender, whether it's politics, whether it's a language, whether it is sects in Islam. These are important things which in the future we could compete, we could go to elections or talk about it. Today, Afghanistan needs only one thing, and that is peace. If we don't have peace, we have nothing whatsoever, from education to health, to our politics, to anything. My request is not just from us, the negotiators. Thank God, so far, we have been very united and very committed to this. But my request is from our politicians. My request is from every single voice which matters in Afghanistan, that for God's sake, leave your differences aside. Only for a few months, only if it is for a few months, put Afghanistan in front of you and see the good of Afghanistan and the importance of peace. Later, we could compete politically or whatever, but not now. Simply not now.
Wise words. Thank you very much. I hope your call is heeded. Most of you who will be listening to this will not know I'm from Iraq originally. And so for us, any of us in Iraq.
So am I.
Exactly. Al-Gailani for us, of course, is, we claim the Al-Gailanis as Iraqis. So Fatima, to speak to you,
I'm the second generation.
Iraqi, of course.
I'm the second in Afghanistan, yes. My father is the first, I'm the second generation in Afghanistan.
And it is a delight speaking to you, but also we share your pain. For many Iraqis, they share the pain of Afghans, and we wish you luck in your endeavors. Thank you to all of you who have tuned in, and thank you for your questions. I tried to take all of them. I apologize, there was one last one, but we ran out of time. Joan, I'm going to hand over to you now so we can wrap up in time. Thank you so much once again, Fatima.
Thank you.
Rina, Fatima, that was utterly inspirational and gave me huge hope I was just so inspired, particularly, Fatima, your reference to education is vital, and if you have it, no one can take it away from you. As a University of York, and we are very proud to have educated a number of Afghanis over the years, that feels like truly our sense of mission and social purpose. I am so proud to have hosted the two of you in conversation. Mina, I thought you drew out all of the stories and the lived experiences, and I've come away with a sense of how vitally important it is for everybody that peace is achieved, that peace is achieved at a pace where everyone is included, and that the opportunity to facilitate through our open engagement and public engagement platforms the ideas and the inclusion that you brought today, and the sense of pragmatic approach to peace building, but also that sense of hopeful inspiration and inclusion was really just truly a wonderful end to a series of International Women's Day events that we are incredibly proud to host. So thank you very much to both of you. I wish you every good fortune in the ongoing peace negotiations. Please stay in touch. We would very much love to bring the two of you to York to continue the conversation. Thank you to our audience. It's an absolute passion of ours to bring people together with different experiences, different cultural experiences, different ideas, different opinions. Today has been an exemplar of that, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being with us today. And have a lovely rest of the day, everyone. But thank you again for being truly inspirational. I've gone away with a huge sense of hope. Thank you.